Good morning. It's Market Day Report, and how about we start trading markets in a new month? That's right. We wrap things up on Friday, the end of October, so now here we are in November, and what do we have, like 7 weeks of trading left to go once you throw in holidays? How about we see what happened in the overnight session with corn? Good place to start. Penny higher, 432.5. Every contract was in higher territory in that overnight session. Beans were higher as well. 1105.5 on the November is where we settled, up 5 3/4 cents. By the way, beans have been higher for 2 straight sessions, talking about daytime sessions now. And soy meal contracts have been higher over the past 13 sessions. That's right, 13 days of wins for soy meal. Now, bean oil has struggled. It's been lower for 4 straight sessions. We see some 48s on the big board this morning. Wheat market moving a little higher, up 7, 541 on the Chicago. And for Kansas City, it's 4 1/4 higher, 528 3/4. Spring wheat higher across the board. Finally, cotton market 65.06, down 48 points. Brian Hoops, President, Midwest Market Solutions. All right, Brian, you made it through Halloween. What's your focus today?
Hey, good morning, Tony. Yeah, so a lot of news coming out of the weekend, as it seems like it always is a busy weekend as far as news goes, and it does affect some of our grain markets. Now, we pushed to new highs in corn and soybeans and wheat overnight and kind of came back off of those session highs. Reuters is reporting that China has purchased 20 cargoes of soybeans from Brazil, not from the US, but from Brazil. And this starting in December, about 10 contracts there, and then another 10 from March out through July. So the dollar plus rally we've had in soybeans here in the US, tightening basis, has kind of priced us out of the world export market. And Brazil's coming in at cheaper money. They still have product left to sell because they had such a big crop this last year. Of course, they're planting corn, the first corn crop in Brazil. They're planting soybeans. They are just a little bit behind their normal pace after some rains last week kind of slowed their planting pace, but they've had really good rains. They're off to a great start as far as their growing conditions, and they are planting more acres. So there's going to be a lot of crop again competing with the U.S. Despite this Chinese trade agreement. China is stepping in and buying beans out of Brazil. And we may hear more and more of that. And trying to enforce this agreement with China may be one of the next hurdles that the Trump administration has to enforce. Now, Bloomberg is reporting on Friday, China was seeking or at least interested in buying U.S. wheat. And we saw a rally off of the lows in wheat, and that's carried into higher prices overnight. So we're 20, 25 cents off of our Friday lows by the Sunday night highs, based off of this Newswire report that China is looking at U.S. wheat. Of course, we haven't seen any confirmation of it on late Friday afternoon. A lot of people probably missed this, but the USDA did announce they are going to have a WASDE report and a cattle on feed report this month. We don't know what's going to happen with the October numbers. They didn't say anything, but instead of November the 10th, the WASDE report will be November the 14th. That's a Friday. And then a week later will be the cattle on feed report, the 21st, as expected. So we are going to get some government numbers. We don't expect any crop progress numbers this afternoon, although some of the news wires are doing estimates. Same thing for the census crush that's supposed to be out this afternoon. There's estimates that are out there. What the trade expects would be is kind of widely known, but just not what the actual government numbers are.
Now, Brian, they also announced one report coming out twice during the month. It's not the same, well, it is the same report, but different data. Over 2 months, we'll get 2 of those in the month of November. What report is that? Well, hang around, find out right around the corner. This is Market Day Report. It's Market Day Report. All right, we did have some cash trade last week. We'll talk more about that in a moment. Also, like Brian Hoops mentioned just a moment ago, we'll get a cattle on feed report this month, as that's set to come out on November 21st. All right, let's, speaking of cattle, find out how we finished off the month of October. Live cattle futures 140 lower on the December at 229.70 and February at 227.65, down a buck 85. How about feeders? Feeders settling the session on Friday down 342. That on the November at 338.40 and 247 lower on the January at 331.75. Hog trade on Friday was mixed, with December up 52, 81.35. And then we go to Class 3 milk futures, settling mostly lower on Friday, that November at 17.30, down 9. Brian Hoops is president, Midwest Market Solutions. Brian, I mentioned dairy at the end because USDA says we'll get the first milk production report on the 10th, and we'll get a second one on the 21st. So kind of interesting. We'll get a WASDE report, crop production report in there, and a cattle on feed, now 2 milk production reports. But anyway, back over to the cattle side. Cash trade, interesting last week.
Yeah, it was. We were lower across the board and ended that way, and just really didn't seem like we cleaned up a lot of inventory. Seems like there's some that was carried over this week. I think the feedlots are kind of figuring that if the futures market stabilized, there was no point in selling at the lower money that we saw early in the week. We're going to hold out for more of a steady go or even higher money this week. So I think there's going to be a little bit of numbers carried over to this week with that mentality. So we were basically $9 lower, 360 on a dress basis, and about $3 to $4 lower on a live basis in the Southern Plains, around that 235 range. So we should have that, maybe even better this week. The cutout values did increase last week. We're up over $5 in the choice and nearly that in the select. So that's helping out the packer margins. They're still in the red, but they are improving quite a bit. So we'll look for cattle market to try and stabilize. Had a big round of profit taking on Friday. And, normally I say you need to trade cattle from a fundamental standpoint. But if we take out last week's highs, which I think was made on a Wednesday, if we can take that out, there's probably a lot of buy stops above there, and maybe that's a point where the funds step back into the long side of the market. So that's a key technical point to watch.
All right, Brian Hoops, president, Midwest Market Solutions.